population into this. That is not the case. It is time to move forward. As we move forward, I am concerned about Kyle being able to continue to receive the services at the same level he has for the past 24 years. There is no doubt in my mind that without these services, he would not be employed in the community and would not be paying into the system he benefits from, especially job supports. As an infant and toddler, Kyle was medically fragile. He had a trach, G-tube, and ileostomy, to name a few. We benefited from a strong case management program from private insurance. They were able to go outside the regular benefits from the HMO to keep Kyle at home. Unfortunately, not all insurance companies are willing to do this. Will the MCOs be willing to do this? That remains to be seen. I feel effective oversight is imperative to assure Iowans on Medicaid continue to receive the services they need to be full participants in their communities. We currently have one ombudsman appointed for over 550,000 Medicaid recipients. Is this adequate? In terms of how oversight might look, I have done a bit of research on my own. The Kaiser Foundation provides many great points from an issues paper titled People with Disabilities and Medicaid Managed Care, Key Issues to Consider. Some of these are broader networks, acute and long-term care, a wide array of specialists and specialty facilities, including pediatric specialists. Specialized measures should be developed to monitor these regarding access and quality of care specific to the disability population. Allow travel to access specialty care. In terms of enrollment recommendations, Kaiser recommends choice counselors or navigators to assist beneficiaries in enrollment, extremely important for people with disabilities and mental illness. Lastly, but perhaps most important, there must be stakeholder input. Examples include focus groups and advisory and oversight committees that should include beneficiaries and or their parents or guardians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stumpf. And our fourth speaker, and then we'll have some questions. But our fourth speaker is Rhonda Shouse, a consumer from Marion. And Rhonda, welcome to the Government Oversight Committee.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Rhonda Shouse. I live in Marion. I am a Medicaid beneficiary myself. I have also been on the Mental Health Planning Council for almost 10 years. I've done a lot of advocacy work across the state. I also have a daughter who is a Medicaid beneficiary, a young adult. And for me, I'm here today because of Medicaid Managed Care Oversight. And to me, it boils down to trust at this point. Over the past year, Iowa has come to have a major trust problem with many of the 3 million residents. This is just one of several issues that has played a role in that lack of trust. When it comes to Medicaid managed care, we have talked about it for a year now. Money is important and so are people, but those topics have not convinced legislators to protect Iowa from a likely rocky financial road and denials in services for those who need it most. Ultimately, oversight needs to be implemented because of a lack of trust and accountability that has been well earned over the last year. We have MCOs that have not had public trust from day one. MCOs that have had CEOs go to prison for fraud and have paid over $275 million in fines for fraud in other states. There are strong allegations in other states that they have denied services to beneficiaries, and rather than save the state's money, the costs have increased. We have a governor that has chose to bypass an entire branch of government to achieve this goal. We have government officials and employees of at least one MCO who have talked with each other during blackout periods. We've had state officials such as Governor Branstad, Chuck Palmer, and Mickey Steer that have not only lied to the public and the federal government about the readiness of the program, but they've sat before state legislators regularly with reports that do not match the realities of what are happening on the ground. We've been told for months the program is ready. The infamous line by Mickey Steer in February of "we were ready in January and we're even more ready now" was an outright lie. The outcry from beneficiaries, family members, Providers, legislators, and the decision by CMS that Iowa was not ready in January or even in March demonstrates otherwise. The state still isn't ready, and the program is set to begin in 2 weeks. Yet the same mantra continues to be used despite evidence that says otherwise. Saying something repeatedly does not make it true. Iowans no longer trust the system or the people that are running it. We need legislators to restore integrity to state government, to look at the evidence in other states that have moved to Medicaid managed care. If nothing else, consider the possibility that common financial results in other states may happen in Iowa. We need them to step up and protect Iowans who are guilty of nothing other than having an illness, a disability, or being poor and needing health care to literally survive on a daily basis. Kansas is a state that many Iowans from the public and the legislators have pointed to as an example. It moved to Medicaid managed care 3 years ago, and the situation continues to become more dire each day. The state is hemorrhaging money, and people have died due to a lack of services. 2 of the MCOs selected by Iowa are major players in that program. Here are some excerpts of a recent article regarding Kansas' program. Some Kansas lawmakers admit it's difficult to make meaningful change on a large scale with 3 private insurance companies. Quote, we've taken a hands-off approach by contracting with the MCOs and letting them do what they do, said Kansas Senator Laura Kelly, a Democrat who sits on the Medicaid Oversight Committee. That makes it very difficult for us to intervene on behalf of an individual who we can do it on a case-by-case basis, but not systematically. I would really encourage Iowa to have people who know Medicaid. Representative Barbara Bollinger, who is a Republican, said, for or against privatization, you need that. She has also said using for-profit companies to manage care may not be the most successful model to sustain quality care. There is no way to save money with these programs unless you absolutely deny entrance into the program, you cut back on services, or you pay the providers less. But for Iowa, she said, it is ultimately too late to heed Kelly's biggest piece of advice, which was to suggest Iowa not do it at all. So as far as oversight, yesterday Mickey Steyer presented a report that talks about all the ways Iowa will oversee the program. It includes DHS, IME, Department of Inspections and Appeals, Iowa Insurance Division, and the 3 MCOs. IME has already proven it cannot communicate clearly with any target audience regarding this issue. Yet we're expected to believe all of these departments will work together seamlessly. Oversight must be a standalone committee. We have to have people involved that understand all of Iowa's needs monitoring this program, not to micromanage the companies to the point that they don't make money, but to protect Iowa's financial interest and the health of over 500,000 Iowans. We aren't against the state saving money or companies even making money, but we have grave concerns about the methods that are going to be used to do so. Oversight must include providers, beneficiaries, and family members. We have beneficiaries and family members who have more working knowledge on this issue than many of the state legislators who are voting on it. I would put mine and Bill's knowledge on this subject against theirs on any given day. Some legislators have talked about using an existing committee such as MAC for oversight. I'm here to say this is not adequate. Medicaid is one of Iowa's top 2 expenditures and involves 1/5 of the population. That is something that should not be another agenda item for an already busy committee. That warrants a standalone oversight committee. We again are talking about trust and accountability. But let's look at MAC. The full council meets 2 times a year, and the executive council meets only 6 times a year. On iowa.gov, it shows there are 3 vacancies for terms that ended in 2013. But if you look at DHS's portion of that same website, it states there are 33 vacancies. Accurate, consistent information hasn't been the state's strong suit regarding managed care. But here's another of examples of how it is not, again. 2 state representatives in November asked the governor's office about these vacancies and was told the phrase "an equal number" referring to consumer groups was meant as a maximum, not actually to be equal. The legislators asked the Attorney General's office for an official opinion on the matter. It's the middle of March and we still have not received one. I have a friend who applied for the MAC in December and was told there were no vacancies until June. I applied in January. This is a government-appointed board, the same governor who says oversight is overkill. Excuse me. What information do we believe? We have 2 websites and a governor's office giving conflicting information. It comes back to trust and accountability. There is a sign on the wall outside the House chamber entrance that I found very interesting. It says, quote, "Courageous confidence in the intelligence of the community is a sure sign of leadership and success. The ideal state that in which an injury done to the least of its citizen is an injury done to all." I am here today to tell legislators in both the Senate and the House that the least of its citizens are and will encourage injury if strong oversight is not put into place regarding Medicaid managed care. And in closing, I want to point out a situation that occurred this week. Almost 7 years ago, Iowa had a moment where it should have served as a warning of what can and will happen when adequate health services are not available. Mark Becker, a young man with severe mental illness, shot and killed his coach due to a lack of treatment for his illness. This was a warning the state of Iowa did not heed. Iowa is now reliving this tragedy because apparently one tragedy was not enough for state officials to act. This week, I lost a friend, Jackie, and Iowa lost a true advocate when her son, who has severely mental illness, allegedly killed her and her mother. Jackie served on Iowa's Mental Health Planning Council, the Olmsted Task Force, the Iowa Disability and Aging Task Force, worked with NAMI of Iowa, and worked for the Office of Consumer Affairs. She had advocated for her son and others to get medical treatment they needed inside the state. This is not a woman who just didn't know how to access the services. Jackie knew every service the state offered inside and out, and the lack of services, service providers, and acute psychiatric beds in the state failed her. The closing of 2 of Iowa's MHIs last year as a cost-saving measure has helped facilitate this tragedy. I would like to remind you that legislators from both political parties and in both chambers worked overtime to try to provide funding for, if nothing else, an orderly transition in that closing. Governor Branstad vetoed that agreement among legislators and closed the MHIs without adequate transition plan. 3 people died within 2 months. Now we have another tragedy of epic proportions that could have been prevented with adequate services and medical treatment. I'm here today to implore you on behalf of Jackie and her son, who can't be here because they paid the ultimate price for Iowa's failure to provide services and a safety net. This is what you need to do to a vote to provide that accountability and that safety net with a full Oversight Committee for Medicaid managed care. How many more lives must be lost? How many more families and communities must be devastated? How many more preventable tragedies must occur before Iowa officials step up and create a true safety net? Oversight is not about micromanaging. It is about creating accountability and reestablishing trust and integrity in state government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shouse, and I think everybody in this room, our hearts go out to what has happened to Jackie and the tragedy, and I remember vividly when Coach Thomas was killed, and have heard Mrs. Becker speak about that situation, and again we're reminded that there are real consequences if we don't get this right. So thank you for being here today. I'm looking around to see if members have any questions for our witnesses. I have a couple questions. And I'm going to start, Ms. Knedler, with you. You talked about your closing, your discontinuation of an integrated health home project. Mm-hmm. You referred to 300 patients are going to be turned away. It's a tragedy. Could you explain more about that, and how does that relate to the Medicaid transition?
We had that program with Magellan, which was the primary behavioral health provider for managed care in Iowa prior to this change. We worked very diligently to put together a program of wraparound services with them. They did not pay us our full cost, but we knew if we had the right people caring for these patients, we could keep them out of the ER, we could keep them out of our inpatient unit. With Magellan gone, who had expertise in integrated health homes, we would have to begin to work with 3 different providers.
And
Yes.
just so I understand that, this transition that Governor Branstad has been pursuing disrupted your relationship with a long-standing provider, Magellan.
Correct, correct.
And none of the current MCOs have been
Sure.
willing to step in and fill that void?
They've not chosen Magellan. They intend to try to provide these services themselves. Some of them have some expertise in behavioral, some of them have none. We administratively could not deal with 3 different organizations, 3 different rules, 3 different administrative rules to care for patients, and even if these patients got into the integrated health home. So no, we are transitioning out.
Thank you. And then I had a question for Mr. Elbert and also Ms. Shouse. Both of you used the word denial, that you're both concerned about denials. I'd like you to speak a little bit more about this, but I also want to share one of my Senate colleagues received a call this morning, and this is just the latest of a long series of calls we're receiving from constituents who are facing this process. I've received them. I received a call from a mother who had not been able to pick up her prescriptions under the Hawkeye program, the same prescription she's been filling for the last 10 years. The Senate colleague this morning had the story about somebody who's now being told that the constituent's adult child who has disabilities is now facing a 4.5-hour trip to see a medical provider. And that may not be a denial, but it certainly creates major barriers to access to medical care. So when you talk about denials, do you have specific instances or examples or concerns that you can share with the committee? And let's go with Mr. Elbert first and then Ms. Shouse.
I don't have any specific ones related to these particular insurance companies at this point. My main thing in bringing that up is just that from a practice management standpoint, there's always denials that come back. You know, maybe we had something wrong on a claim or anything like that. Those are things we need to clean up and fix. You know, obviously you can get to be a little bit cynical when you're dealing with insurance companies, but sometimes you get the feeling that they just deny, 10% of them out of hand or something like that. It probably doesn't happen, but that's the way it feels like. And from a cash flow perspective, every time that happens, you have to go through the process of refiling the claim to try to get it paid for, which to us as an administrative overhead, there's a charge associated with every claim that we process. Every one that we send out the door, there's a charge associated to us for that. What I would really like to see is just, and I don't have any data or anything so far as how many denials traditional Medicare would have had, but I would think that should be available somewhere. Iowa Medicaid should be able to come up with something like that, and just try to make sure that it's not significantly more coming out through it. If there are, I would actually want to take a look at their billing or their billing rules so far as actually getting a clean claim through and getting payment on it, because they might be difficult, especially given that we're having to deal with 3 different companies for it, 3 different sets of rules.
So your concern on that is that you experience some denials right now.
Yes.
And you are significantly concerned there's going to be a significant increase in denials going forward because you're having to deal with 3 new companies that you've not had a prior deal with previously.
I don't know that there's going to be more moving forward, but from an oversight perspective, I would like somebody to be watching and seeing if there is, and in the event that there is, have someone able to step in and take a serious look at it, as opposed to just a whole bunch of little clinics out there complaining, well, hey, we keep getting denials on these and we can't figure out why.
Thank you. Ms. Shouse or even Mr. Stumpf, denial have you heard concerns about that?
I have, especially, first of all, Kansas. Looking at Kansas as far as talking about denials, we heard from the Ombudsman's office here with a report talking about, talking to Kansas officials and saying, if you could start over, what would you have done differently? And one of the first things they said was be sure to have adequate help with ombudsman as well as legal assistance for the denials that come in years 2 and 3. Denials take time. Time is not something people who are chronically ill have. We can't wait 90 days, 60 days to go to a doctor when you're on dialysis or whatever. As far as Iowa, the most common denial issue right now that we're aware of is the Hawkeye situation with United Healthcare. United Healthcare is one of the managed care companies that we're going to be dealing with. This is a company that's been well established for many years doing healthcare across the country. When they took over the Wellmark portion of the Hawkeye children who were doing speech therapy all of a sudden started receiving letters saying we do not cover speech therapy unless you've had a stroke. This is a huge, huge concern.
Committee members. Mr. Stumpf, do you have anything to add on that? Okay. Committee members, are any further questions? Seeing none, I want to thank each of you. I know some of you have traveled a long way to speak with us for a few minutes, but it means a lot to me and to the committee members to hear from real people who are dealing with this transition as we get ready to take up this legislation. So I want to thank you for being here, and if there's not space, committee members, it's okay with me if they remain at the table while we deliberate. But at this point, thank you for your time, and if you do need to go, you feel free to leave if you need to. With that, I'm going to turn the chair over to Senator Shane John to recognize me for Senate Study Bill 3173 and the subcommittee as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we need to go into
Yes.
subcommittee?
So I need, with unanimous consent of the committee, to go into a subcommittee of the whole. Is there objection? Seeing none, we will now go into committee of the whole on Senate Study Bill 3173. You are in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Study Bill 3173 is a piece of legislation we should all be familiar with because we've already passed this with a couple minor changes on the Senate floor. We have made a couple minor changes to change some of the legislative findings in the hopes that it would be more likely to get Governor Branstad's signature if we're able to get it passed. But the core of this bill is about protecting Iowans in this transition. Number one, we need to protect consumers. This legislation says, in response to some of the testimony we've just heard and the thousands of Iowans who have spoken up on this issue, that the MCOs will continue to provide all medically necessary services, that there will be conflict-free case management so that we don't have denials, and that we'll have meaningful appeal rights and that recipients will be able to continue to receive services while their appeal is pending. This bill is about protection for Iowa providers. We have to have protection for providers in order to maintain adequate networks of service. And when we hear stories, and it's not just the one isolated incident, it's just the most recent one, where people are fearing that they're going to have to travel hours to get to a provider. We need to have adequate service statewide, and so this legislation helps with that by maintaining provider rates so that they don't, that these companies don't profit at the expense of Iowa providers, and also making sure that there's a single coordinated process so that providers aren't having to deal with 3 different systems. This legislation, Mr. Chair, is also about protection to the taxpayers. What has happened in other states is that after a year or two, private managed care providers have oftentimes significantly increased their rates. And once the transition is made, there is no remaining credible public alternative. And so this legislation includes limitations on rate increases. It also includes strict definitions about what qualifies as administrative costs that are subject to the 88% medical loss ratio. I know that's technically a complicated concept, But the danger in other states has been they have shifted administrative costs into the definition of medical services, and that is in fact what happened that resulted in WellCare, excuse me, that's a big difference, WellCare officials in Florida ending up being convicted. So, Mr. Chair, this legislation is important to protect consumers, Iowa consumers. It's important to protect Iowa providers. It's important to protect Iowa taxpayers. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions that the committee might have.
Is there discussion? There is discussion. Senator Garrett, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And being we're in the subcommittee of the whole, I'm not real sure about the process, but I guess I'd like to ask if Senator Hogue would yield.
Yes.
It looks to me, Senator Hogue, that like this bill is pretty much, and I think you even said this, pretty much the same bill that we passed a little while back in the Senate here. Is that correct?
It is virtually identical, yes.
Yes,
And in
okay.
substance, it is identical.
Yes. So my question is, the bill didn't go anywhere in the House. Is there an understanding with the House now that they've changed their mind, or is there some reason that we have to think that now the House will pass this bill when they didn't take it up before, or what's the situation there?
Excuse me, Representative Garrett.
I used
As a
to be.
former Representative Hogue, Senator Garrett, thank you for that question. We need to give the House the full opportunity to address this issue. So my hope is that we will be able to pass this out of committee today, pass this as soon as possible off the floor of the Senate, get it to the House in a funnel-proof form, which is a government oversight committee, and this is a legitimate oversight bill. We are talking about overseeing a program that serves 560,000 Iowans, and more than that, really oversees a program that is the safety net for all Iowans. And, you know, we need to engage in that discussion with the House. And I have not had the opportunity to confer with them why they weren't able to get it out of committee before the funnel, but they didn't. We're going to give them every opportunity to do that, and this allows us to continue to have those conversations for the rest of the legislative session.
Thank you, Senator Hogue. And I was afraid that was probably the case, that we have no reason to think the House will take up this bill any more readily than they took up this same bill a couple weeks ago when we passed it. And I would suggest, I think we're all interested in oversight. Obviously, this isn't a simple process, and we all know that. And but it seems to me that our goal at the present time should be trying to get everybody to work together to make this process work as best as we can. That's what's in the best interest of Iowans. I understand that we like to make our political points and so on, and we all do that. But I would suggest that maybe we're past that point now. This process is going to take place. It's been approved by the federal government. The attempts to terminate it, that was another bill that was passed that went nowhere in the House. That was not successful. So we are going to move on. So isn't it incumbent on all of us now to do the very best we can to make this process work? It doesn't help Iowans to have legislators squabbling back and forth over this and that. That doesn't improve anybody's treatment. So while, again, I agree we need oversight, but if we're going to pass an oversight bill, why not work together with the House and see if we can come up with something that will pass both chambers that we can send to the governor, rather than passing something that I would say we have every reason to assume that the House won't take it up, since they didn't before, and since we've not apparently communicated with them and tried to work out any kind of a compromise or a bill with them. So I'm a little perplexed as to why we're passing this same bill again that we just passed and that we were unsuccessful with. So that would be my recommendation. I'd like to see us try to work better with the House, and so I'm going to vote no again on this bill, and with the hope that we can do better down the road.
Is there further discussion? Senator Whitford.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just piggyback a little bit on what Julian said, or Senator Garrett, I'm sorry. I did talk to the Government Oversight Chair in the House, Representative Kaufman, and he has not heard anything from this committee at this point, which you just did say, but I would encourage us to work with them. Almost every legislator, I think every legislator in the Senate has voted on some type of oversight, whether it was the amendment that we put forward or the final bill that looks similar to this bill. And so I believe almost every legislator in this building wants to make sure we get something passed this session. And I believe that we should be working with the House. We should be working with now the Government Oversight Committee, and I believe that you will do that. And so it's very important to me and to, I would say, most of us to provide that oversight, not only for the taxpayers, but more importantly, for the people that receive these services. And so it's something we want to work with, but I encourage us to reach across the aisle. There's only 30 or 40 days left in session. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Whitford. Is there any further discussion?
I did speak with Representative Kaufman last night, and we are planning to meet and discuss this going forward, just so you're aware that I was talking with him.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, do you wish to do closing remarks after subcommittee or at the? Okay, let's move the bill out of subcommittee then. How do you wish to vote?
Record.
Record is called for. Clerk will call the record, please. Call the roll. Okay. 3-2, the bill comes out of subcommittee with unanimous consent of the committee. We will now come from out of subcommittee to full committee. Senator Hogue, you are in order.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the subcommittee for advancing this bill back into the full committee. I want to make a couple observations. First of all, our chairs of our Health and Human Service Budget and Policy Committees are in the room today, and I know they have worked extensively on this issue, and we had strong bipartisan support for this legislation on the floor of the state Senate, and I believe we need to move this process forward. To suggest that somehow this is political, when you've just heard the testimony you've heard and about the real life and unfortunately death consequences of the decisions that we're making today, I think is unfortunate. For me, this is an extraordinarily practical exercise to figure out how to make a transition that I didn't support and I didn't ask for, to make it actually work for people. We have got to, we're doing this now, wasn't my idea, but we're doing it, but we've got to do a lot to make sure it works for people, because the people who fall through the cracks is a human tragedy. So this is a good bill. I don't know why the House didn't take this bill up in its standing policy committee, where in my judgment, it really does belong, but I do think it is an appropriate oversight committee, so that's why I said when I was asked, yes, we can run it through this committee. We've got to find a way to safeguard our people from the tragedies that can happen if this continues to be done poorly. This transition has been botched time and time and time again. And when I met with the people out in western Iowa last December and heard the stories about how it was already rupturing their relationships with their longtime case managers and their providers, that was wrong. And it continues to be wrong. So we've got to do everything we can and give the Iowa House and Governor Branstad every opportunity to step up to the plate and do what Iowans are counting on them to do. That concludes my opening comments in committee, and if there are no further discussion, I would move Senate Study Bill 3173 in the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, how do you wish to vote?
Record.
The record is called for. The clerk will call the record. The ayes have it. The bill now will move forward to the floor
It's a committee bill.
as a committee bill, yes. And with that, I will turn the chair back to the chair.
Thank you. At this point, the committee meeting is not over. We've got another bill to take up. But I do want to let people who are here, if you really do need to go, you've been watching that first bill, you can feel free to excuse yourselves. And at this point, we will now take up 3172. We'll give people just a moment to excuse yourselves. But we will in just a moment be taking up Senate Study Bill 3172, which deals with certification and inspection of children's residential facilities with Senator Shane John. The bills. Copy of the bill for Senator Hornbach. All right. Thank you, everybody. Senator Shane John, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to go into a subcommittee of the whole. Seeing no objection, we're in the subcommittee of the whole. Senator Shane John, you're in order for opening comments on Senate Study Bill 3172.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This legislation passed the Senate 48-0 on March 3rd. The House did not take up the bill. It was very close to funnel. They said they did not have time to properly vet the bill, and so this is the same bill, but since it's now an oversight bill, it's going to be eligible for a House action on all session, and I hope they do. I do know that Representative Kaufman did hold hearings on this yesterday, and so I think it will have some support, and so this issue is extremely important. 3172 increases state oversight over boarding schools like the now closed Midwest Academy. The Midwest Academy and its founder are under investigation by local and state authorities as well as the FBI into child abuse allegations. Current law allows these private facilities to operate with little oversight. None of us in the Senate believe that that was right. And the state agency officials from the Department of Ed, Human Services, Inspections Appeals, all work together to provide input into this legislation, make sure if children are going to be living at a residential facility, whether it's private or state, they must adhere to safety regulations for both the facility and its residents. The bill itself calls for minimum standards, health, safety, education needs, protection from mistreatment, abuse, neglect, addresses appropriate use of seclusion, restraint, or other restrictive interventions. The background and records checks of those providing care are required. There is also injunctive relief and civil action is permitted, and the action may be instituted by the state, a county, or parent, or legal guardian who is placed in the facility. These facilities must provide an educational program, appropriate educational services to the children by contracting with a school district where the facility is located, or accredited non-public school, or becoming accredited as a non-public school. The facility must describe these offerings to their publications and website. They must include all promotional, advertising, marketing materials, fees charged for the services, and return policies. I think it's a great bill. It is not altered in any manner from the bill that was passed on the floor. Again, it will become an oversight bill to give the House more time to consider this bill. And that concludes my opening remarks to the subcommittee.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Shane John. And we are in a subcommittee of whole. I do want to make a couple observations. The Senate Education Committee had all the principals who were involved in the oversight or lack of oversight that we previously had over facilities like the Midwest Academy. Senator Kinney, Senator Shane John, and I all happen to serve on the Senate Education Committee. I don't believe Senator Garrett or Senator Whitver that either of you do. We do have people here today, if you have questions and would like to get more, since we are in a subcommittee, that would be appropriate. I would also mention that for this committee, the Department of Education asked me to share with committee members a letter that they had prepared for Senator Quirmbach that pointed out the department's regulatory kind of limitations in dealing with this situation previously. And so we have had the agencies, and I appreciate the chair of the Education Committee being here. He really shepherded us through a process, got all the groups together. We had good legislation, passed it 48-0 on March 3rd, and then it languished in the House Education Committee last week. So we have passed this already unanimously, but I did want to make sure Senator Garrett and Senator Whitmer, especially, if you had any questions. I see we have representatives of the DHS, the Department of Education. Is Department of Inspections and Appeals here? Yes, there we go. So those are some of the principal agencies that have been involved. Any questions from the committee members? Yes, Senator Garrett.
Well, in light of the letter here, this does raise a question in my mind that hopefully somebody can answer. I think we're all concerned about this particular academy, I guess it is, Midwest Academy, but I'm wondering if we pass this bill, are there going to be other entities that we may cover that intentionally or unintentionally? I guess that would be my only concern.
Senator Garrett, we can Senator Quirmbach can answer that. The others can answer it. Let me try. We believe there are 3 facilities in the state currently that would be covered by this. We also believe,
in addition to,
not in addition,
including
well, although Midwest Academy is now closed,
yeah,
but including it. So there are
Okay,
2 additional
others.
facilities that would be covered by it, and I believe, and we've written this very. I think this is one of the finest pieces of drafting I've seen, in a way that if other facilities come up in the future, they would be covered by it. This is it's not the strongest regulatory touch, but I think any time you have an educational facility where people are boarding overnight, I think you want the state of Iowa to be able to have some access to regulatory oversight of that. One of the facilities is in Representative Kaufman's district and Senator Dvorsky's district, Scattergood. I have been there. I think the world of Scattergood. I also believe Scattergood would benefit by having some eyes, just to reassure parents that they are subjected to oversight. I see Phil Wise seeking recognition. Mr. Wise, do you have anything to add to that in Subcommittee of the Whole? Thank you. Does that address your question, Senator Garrett, or you have?
Well, what about the other? You said there are 2 others. Do you know anything about the second?
Let's ask Mr. Wise. Any further discussion on that or questions? With that, in Subcommittee of the Whole, Senator Shane John, any closing comments? Oh, we're in Subcommittee of the Whole, so Senator Quirmbach is allowed to say something.
I was going to have to ask unanimous consent, but in subcommittee I don't have to. Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate your bringing this legislation forward again. We have had, up until a week ago, great cooperation in moving this bill forward, both between the parties in the Senate and between the legislative and executive branches. This matter first came to my attention with the news reports about 6-7 weeks ago regarding search warrants being served pursuant to allegations of sexual abuse. And that certainly caught my attention. I think caught a lot of people's attention. We asked our staff to contact the relevant executive branch agencies, Department of Education, Department of Human Services, Attorney General, and so forth, to see what they knew about the situation, what they were doing about the situation. And kind of the bottom line of the reports that came back was that we don't have adequate authority. So I decided that they needed some authority to deal with this situation. We had a bill drafted, clearly a preliminary bill, a work in progress, and we were up against the first funnel deadline. So we reached out and had great cooperation from the ranking member, Senator Sinclair, to get support to move the bill out of committee on a preliminary basis, but to meet the first funnel deadline. And we did that, but at the same time, we pledged to have broad consultation before we brought any final bill to the full Senate. And we did that. The governor had tasked members of various executive branch agencies to come together to work on a proposal here. We met with those folks, heard their ideas, invited them to come before the Education Committee, which had already passed the bill, but to bring the issue back for more discussion. They made their presentation. We had great discussion, lots of questions from both sides of the aisle. Passed out an amendment, unanimous, well, excuse me, we didn't pass it out, bill had already passed out, but we drafted an amendment, basically took the executive branch agency's recommendations, made a couple of small changes, but brought that to the full Senate, and as you noted, it passed 48-0. So we had great cooperation between Republicans and Democrats, between legislative branch and executive branch. I can't tell you how disappointed I am that the House, frankly, dropped the ball. They had a full week to consider it. You know, they had questions. I'm sure they didn't. Yesterday, the Oversight Committee did pick it up, and I'm hopeful then that this indicates a renewed interest and attention from the House in this terrible matter. Resolving the issues with regard to Midwest Academy, all the various allegations, you know, I'm not entirely convinced that the executive branch agencies used the authority that they did have, but it's clear that it was partial and incomplete, and we need to firm that up. The resolution of the Midwest Academy situation now is in the hands of the investigators, the prosecutors, the courts. I anticipate, well, there's already a lawsuit from the parents. There's potential for criminal action, but we need to make sure that we close the door, slam the door from any situation like this developing in the future. And the outstanding boarding schools, only a couple of them that we do have in this state, really deserve to have their reputation defended, and I think that's what is going to be a byproduct of this. So again, Mr. Chair, thank you for bringing this forward. Senator Shane John, thank you for chairing the subcommittee, and I sure hope the committee will move it forward today.
Thank you, Senator Kornbach, for joining us in the subcommittee. With that, seeing no further discussion, Senator Shane John moves Senate Study Bill 3172 out of the subcommittee as a whole. Short form has been requested. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. With unanimous consent, we will now dissolve out of the subcommittee of the whole into the committee. Senator Shane John, any further opening remarks?
Oh, I think I'm ready to move the bill forward.
Any further discussion in committee now? Seeing none, Senator Shane John moves Senate Study Bill 3172 short form. You know what? I do want to have one further comment in response to what Senator Kornbach said. I really am trying to make sure that the Government Oversight Committee doesn't become a committee of just unlimited jurisdiction, right? We have very broad jurisdiction. But to the extent I can, philosophically, I'm trying to have people run it through the Standing Policy Committee. So when this came up, I said, let's do it through education, Medicaid oversight. I much prefer to have that go through the committees because those are the people who work with these agencies regularly and these issues regularly and really have the expertise. But we are here. I think this is a proper oversight bill. And with that, Senator Shane John moves Senate Study Bill 3172 in committee. Short form, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Senate Study Bill 3172 will go to the calendar as a oversight committee bill under Rule 40. And with that, Senator Whitver moves that we adjourn.